I should move. I've been dancing around this for a while now. So I'm going to go ahead and say what I was going to say about the Beatles. In July 29th, 4 interviews were published in Datebook, which was a U.S. magazine. It was one with each of the individual Beatles. It was kind of one-on-one interviews. They had originally been posted in a weekly series in the Evening Standard in the UK back in March to no fanfare. Nobody really gave a shit. You know, people were excited to see Beatles stuff, but they didn't get upset. Newsweek in the US would reference the content of these articles in March to no fanfare. The interview was published in Detroit Magazine in April, and it was published in July in Newsweek, all without issue. But when it was published in Datebook on July 29th, the editor of Datebook, Art Unger, included some pull quotes on the cover next to the Beatles' names. The one next to John Lennon actually would prove to be the most incendiary. He was expecting the one next to Paul to be the big ticket item. Next to John, it said, or John's name, it said, "I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity." So this is tying into that Easter stuff we're talking about. This led to a huge backlash of American Beatle audience. Like I said, they said this was from a UK audience. UK didn't care. It got reprinted a couple times here. People didn't really care. But we saw with the Time magazine article, American Christian audiences are going to see some words and then freak out without reading what was inside. So that's what happened here. Got mad at 2 covers without knowing what was actually inside of the articles. Again, Art Unger thought Paul McCartney was going to be the one who drew a bunch of the ire from American citizens. So it was just his face on the cover. It wasn't even a picture of all the Beatles. It was just Paul McCartney. His quote said, "It's a lousy country where anyone black is a dirty N-word." He didn't censor it. Yeah, it was Paul McCartney and his views on how America treats its citizens. So they thought America was going to get mad at Paul McCartney over that, but they didn't. They're like, well, yeah, we know that. You know, America was like, yeah, of course. What did you say about Christianity? And that is what happened. That's what occurred. Shows you where our priorities are. Unger sent copies to different radio stations throughout the country. WAQY in Birmingham, Alabama was the first and kind of most noisy people to respond to this. DJ Tommy Charles said, "That does it for me. I am not going to play the Beatles anymore." July 29th, they had a listener call-in show, and the response was overwhelmingly negative towards the Beatles. People had turned on them, especially in the South. He and his radio DJ partner guy, they publicly destroyed a bunch of their Beatles LPs, in protest of this. Then they later hired a tree grinder to have fans come and bring a bunch of their Beatles memorabilia to throw into the wood chipper.
Jeez.
The KCBN station in Reno had a bonfire that people could come and light all their Beatles shit on fire. Then stations throughout the South followed suit and had their own bonfires. Paul McCartney said in response to this, he said it was hysterical, low-grade American thinking, which, kind of digging yourself a grave, but...
Right.
All of this coincided with the release of their album Yesterday and Today, which was like a U.S. version of... they used to have U.S. versions of albums, which is actually kind of funny that we as American citizens don't know about the U.S. versions anymore. We only go off the U.K. versions of their albums. It's like we didn't get Revolver here. We got Yesterday and Today. And it compiled music from a couple different old albums. But this one's very famous because the cover of it featured the Beatles wearing white butcher's smocks and covered in fake blood and raw meat and baby doll parts, like dismembered baby heads and stuff like that. And they're all smiling and holding torsos and shit like that. And so people were like, what the fuck's going on? Actually, it was kind of a little bit, I've seen it before and I kind of just had written it off as rock and roll kind of stuff. And now I'm going back and with all the political landscape of stuff today, I was kind of like, all right, it's not a good look. Why are we having chopped up babies on this?
So just like a middle finger to them?
I guess it was supposed to be how the U.S. producers were chopping up their music, their babies, to reconstitute it for American audiences. It's like you're taking our artwork and fucking it up by making these American versions of the albums that we worked so hard on. And so to emulate that, they showed that baby cover, I guess. So, but that mixed with this quote from John Lennon, people are now thinking the Beatles are demons. You know what I mean? They're upset twofold now.
Part of the Church of Satan.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, "What? We just heard about where these guys are spending their Sundays." Their music got banned in South Africa and Spain, I guess religious places. The KKK began protesting their shows and like visibly coming and picketing them. Brian Epstein proposed that John Lennon record an apology, and he was on vacation when like this was going, like when they were trying to orchestrate this. So like the engineers spent days designing a dummy head so that way they could amplify the phone call, because Lennon was going to have to record it over the phone. So they tried to make like a dummy head to put like around the phone or something to make it seem like it was coming out of his normal body.
What the heck?
Yeah, it was weird, very weird. So, and then like he ended up backing out, so they didn't end up having to go through with it. But they spent like a while trying to come up with a way to make it sound like he was in the real room giving the apology. I thought that was very strange. This whole thing is sounding kind of like weird, Illuminati-ish.
Fucking weird.
That was according to EMI engineer Jeff Emmerich. I did want to write down where I got that information from, because it was from a guy who worked at EMI at the time. So he was a sound engineer. They did hold a press conference in August, and John Lennon finally issued an apology of sorts. He said, you know what? I just realized I didn't actually read what the quote was that he had said initially. Let me read that first. He said, the first thing that made everyone again, people were mostly mad about the cover. But the quote that he said, and there's a quote in here that you'll recognize, is, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I'm right, and I'll be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Jesus was all right, but his disciples were thick and ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me." But that we're more popular than Jesus now is the quote that people remember from this. John Lennon said that they were bigger than Jesus. So
yeah,
that's really the legacy of it. Mark David Chapman, for what it's worth, has said in different interviews that this interview was motivation for him killing John Lennon. He's said other things in other interviews, but he has said that this is why he did it. And he was a devout Christian. So
yeah,
that could be it. When he finally issued his apology, here's what he said. "I suppose if I had said television was more popular than Jesus, I would have gotten away with it. I'm sorry I opened my mouth. I'm not anti-God, anti-Christ, or anti-religion. I was not knocking it. I was not saying we are greater or better. If you want me to apologize," he concluded, "if that will make you happy, then okay, I'm sorry." So very, very half-assed apology.
Yeah.
To which Tommy Charles canceled an upcoming bonfire for WAQY. The Vatican totally was appeased and issued a statement saying that they've forgiven him. And the New York Times issued an article saying that the whole thing was over.
They're like, but it's John Lennon. It's fine.
The quote that I included here from the New York Times, they said, "The wonder is that such an articulate young man could have expressed himself imprecisely in the first place." So just a fucking stupid ending to this whole thing.
They're like kissing his ass.
And just the fact that he said, like, "Okay, fine, if you want me to apologize, I'll apologize. Fine, I'm sorry." And they all went, "Oh, well, all's forgiven.
Thank you.
Yes.
God."
Well, he's just such a sweet, nice young man. I don't know how he could have said something wrong in the first place. You know, it's just like, this is so stupid. The whole thing was ridiculous. But there you go. That's why the Beatles weren't as popular this year as they had been prior. Really it did mess up a lot of their touring. A lot of U.S. audiences, specifically in the South, we mentioned the bonfires and all that shit. They had the same reaction as they did the Time magazine cover. They said, "John Lennon, you're a demon for saying those things." And he's like, "I was just saying that right now." And like he said, like anybody in the church is going to tell you the same thing. Kids are going to Beatles concerts, not coming to church on Sunday. That's what I'm saying. You know?
Yeah.
Like, like this isn't about us being better. So, yeah, just a whole dumb thing.